Story 1. At a friend's house waiting for the end of the world. One friend had sneaked off just before midnight and turned off the power to the house right at midnight and freaked everyone out. Story 2. Big Cypress Seminole Reservation, Florida for a Phish concert. They played from 11:30 p.m. on December 31st, 1999, until 7:30 a.m. on January 1st, 2000. Things got pretty wild out in the middle of a swamp. Story 3. I was 21 and had a young daughter. It was my turn to have her that new year because I split from her mother, so I didn't do anything. Just the way I like it. Story 4. That was a rough time for me. My 51-year-old brother died suddenly in mid-December. We were slated to have the neighborhood bonfire New Year's Eve party, which we did end up having. Besides the neighbors, my parents came. I remember dancing and crying with my dad, who later passed in 2005. The weird thing is my mom said that he had told her during his lifetime that he would never live to see the year 2000. My parents and siblings are all gone now. You never know what the year may bring. Be sure to cherish each and every moment. Peace and love to all in the coming new year. Story 5. At the time, I was 25 and probably kind of sad I could not party like it's 1999, which was an old song then, ironically, because I was 7 months pregnant with my third kid. Looking back, I never would have remembered what I did on New Year's Eve in 1999. Instead, you just made me remember I was pregnant. I was pregnant with the child that would only live 17 years. Story 6. At a hot nightclub in East Lansing, Michigan, many people wore formal wear. I had a blast and ended up meeting a total hottie that I took home in the early hours of the morning. Good New Year. Story 7. 10 years old at a house party in Pleasant Hills. Mom's friend's house, and I spent the night playing Nintendo 64 with all the kids in attendance. Cue the Donkey Kong, aquatic ambience nostalgia music. Story 8. I was in Denver, Colorado. We were downtown in a huge, dense crowd. Someone threw an empty champagne bottle that hit me on the back of the head and knocked me out cold. When I came to, my friends had dragged me off to the side near a parking garage, and they were telling the police what had happened. All of a sudden, we feel something wet on our heads and look up to find some guys peeing off the top of the garage onto us and the police. Story 9. My boyfriend at the time, who was actually a groomer, had promised to take me to New York City to see the ball drop. As an 18-year-old, I thought that was the coolest thing ever. As always, he was full of lies. I forget his excuse for us not being able to go. We ended up driving around our little town and then standing on a corner outside a little Italian restaurant that had set up their own little ball to drop. I don't think there were even 50 people there. I broke up with that guy a few months later. He's now in prison for being a child molester. I try not to think about that time of my life and how naive I was. Story 10. I was on an airplane that was eerily empty. I think my family were the only people on board other than the crew. At the time, I was young and recognized that it was unusual but didn't understand beyond that. Years later, I realized that people were probably afraid of airplanes dropping out of the sky when the year 2000 problem rolled over. Story 11. At my grandparents' house playing Pokemon Blue, I hit my first jackpot on the slot machine's minutes before midnight. I remember my grandfather making a comment about not hearing any missiles. Story 12. My dad bought a television, and I was bored with all the documentaries and news about the year 2000. It felt like century-end documentaries. They talked about what happened in the past 100 years, followed by messages from leaders around the world and information about how countries would celebrate the millennium. I was 12 and got bored. The most popular songs, I believe, were Millennium, Larger Than Life, and Waiting for Tonight. Story 13. At a family friend's house. I was 9 at the time and my dad died a few months earlier, so it was a weird time for my family. It was the first night I tried alcohol. Realized champagne doesn't do much when mixed with orange juice. Story 14. On the beach in Myrtle Beach, I watched some tourists stand in a close circle around some mortar fireworks that failed to launch, exploded in the tube, and injured them all. I was 9, going on 10, wearing my Pokemon shirt, and incredibly sad because my bully parents convinced my brother and me that we'd never be able to play video games again after that night. They brought us to a hotel party on the beach. My brother was 7. And all I talked about to people was how I'd never be able to play games again while trying not to cry. My parents just got drunk and abandoned us once we were at the party. They got mad at me for crying but refused to drop the "everything will stop working" line that was upsetting me. They just kept doubling down on it. Story 15. Can't recall where I was as I was 6, likely at home, but I must have been wearing those rad as hell 2000 glasses. Back when the year's digits actually worked as glasses. Story 16. I was 15. I believe I was at a local area network party with my older brother and his friends, doing a test run for our upcoming trivia tournament. That may have been 2000. If so, 1999 was at my friend's house playing GoldenEye and wondering how appropriate it would be to hit on his 18-year-old sister. Story 17, 6th Street in Austin, Texas. I was stationed at Fort Hood in the Army. We had a bunch of equipment loaded on trains in anticipation of the year 2000. Naturally, my name comes up on the guard roster for New Year's Eve. I paid some guy $100 to take my shift. I do not regret it. Had a great time in Austin that night. The previous New Year's Eve I spent in Amsterdam, which was also awesome. Now I'm middle-aged, uncool, and tired. Time is the enemy. Story 18. I was working in marketing for a major Canadian bank, and we were all crossing our fingers hoping the year 2000 problem didn't wipe out entire accounts. Spoiler, it didn't. Story 19. At my cousin's house watching the ball drop on television. We went out at midnight to bang pots and pans, and my older cousin came running out saying, "The bridge is on fire on television. Quick, come look." We all rushed inside and saw nothing. He said, "Well, there was all kinds of smoke coming off of it." My aunt quickly said, "That's from the fireworks, you moron." Story 20. I was 12. It was probably only the first or second year I was allowed to stay up for New Year's. We went to a big house party, a family one, so there were other kids. I don't remember much except they had a delicious hot taco dip and set off fireworks at midnight. I think I was a little worried about the year 2000 problem, but I thought it would be just a computer thing, not realizing how big a deal it would be, so the apocalypse hype wasn't really on my mind. It was fun. My poor mom, my sister got sick, and mom had to take her home early and basically ended up cleaning up puke at the turn of the millennium. My mom laughs about it, but my sister still feels bad. Story 21. In my ex-in-law's living room at midnight, I flipped off the light switch. They freaked out, thinking the year 2000 was ending the world as they knew it. The television was still on, and all the other lights were still on. Total pandemonium. One of my finest moments. Story 22. I had to work during the day. One of my coworkers had been sick and she died on this day in 1999. My son was 7 months old. I stayed home with him and mourned the loss of my coworker. Story 23. Discovering my new ability to shoot pearly cream out of my penis. When it first occurred, it scared me to death, thinking it was residual soap coming out from the years prior, but I couldn't understand why it felt so good. Story 24. 14 years old with 3 of my friends. We managed to get our hands on some Colt 45s and drank them in my parents' basement so as not to disturb the rest of my family. When midnight came around, we went across the street to my former elementary school parking lot and smashed our bottles against the walls. We passed out in my living room, and one of my friends vomited in his sleep and was discovered the following morning by one of my parents. We got found out and had to clean up the broken glass. Story 25. Friend's girlfriend had invited us to go to her house 30 kilometers away and stay over because her parents would be out at another New Year's Eve party. The invite got out a bit, and the party became a bit bigger than intended. So when her parents arrived home at 1 a.m. to find a party in full swing with 50 17 to 18-year-olds, her dad hit the roof, and we were unceremoniously ejected. We had brought some really random drinks with us and saved them when we left the house. So that's how we found ourselves at 2 a.m. walking some random rural road in the general direction of home, drinking bottles of peach schnapps and rum. After about 10 kilometers, we found a more major road and managed to flag down a taxi. Story 26. With some friends in my husband's office building in Times Square, right next to the ball drop, we were able to watch the festivities in warm comfort. Story 27. All of my friends went to a mutual friend's house. He cooked us a nice meal. Then we got plastered and ended the evening discussing life while listening to Left Field. We didn't realize when we all departed the next morning that it was the last time we would ever all hang out together. We're scattered all over the world now, but still mostly in touch. Story 28. In bed with my first girlfriend. We just had sex and were pillow talking in bed. We heard geese flying by and were focusing on that when we suddenly realized it was past midnight and told each other Happy New Year. Story 29. I was a single mother in Atlanta with 2 babies. My ex-husband called in a bogus child welfare check to upset me. The police officer looked at us playing in the living room and just said, Happy New Year. I just saw a picture of him yesterday. He's overweight and so is his current partner. I wonder if he cheated on her the way he did with every other wife. Story 30. At work. I was a database programmer for Charles Schwab in San Francisco and was assigned to monitor our mutual fund processing for the year 2000 bug. Nothing happened. A religious coworker was excited at the prospect of Jesus coming back at midnight. I spoiled his fun by mentioning it was already 4 a.m. January 1st in Jerusalem and nothing had happened. Story 31. The dish room of an elite 5-star resort. A lot of people thought the year 2000 was going to end civilization, but the rich individuals in the ballroom were partying regardless. I have to say, in all my years, that was truly the most energy I ever felt from society on New Year's Eve. The media had us thinking it was a 50-50 chance of apocalypse or nothing at all. At midnight, nothing happened. 10 minutes later, a gazillion dirty champagne glasses came rolling in for us to wash. Life kept going just as it always had. Story 32. In Singapore, they turned off the elevators in my building that night because they didn't know if the year 2000 Y2K issue would cause people to get stuck in them. Story 33. A house party. Got drunk, challenged my friend, who is a black belt, to karate. Earring got stuck up in my ear and spent New Year's Day in the emergency room trying to get it out. Best party. Story 34. Downtown Seattle. Watching the Space Needle after someone threatened to blow it up. Someone blew up some transformers, and the power was out on Capitol Hill. Crazy night. Story 35. Delivering pizza for Panucci's Pizza in New York to someone named IC. Wiener. Actually, I don't remember, but whenever I see New Year's Eve 1999, all I think about is Futurama. Story 36. Worked at a hospital. I was in charge of the computer system for my unit. About 30 of us had to be there for when the systems were going to crash. Since that did not happen, several of us left at 3 a.m. and went to an international house of pancakes. Story 37. I was at work overseeing a communication network I was in charge of. We had been instructed to stand by on site in case of year 2000 issues with the computers. It was kind of a party atmosphere, but without the alcohol. We pretty much knew we were safe, but because it was critical infrastructure, it would have been irresponsible to not be prepared. All in all, not an unpleasant experience. Story 38. I was a little boy at my mom and dad's friend's house. I had a little backpack with a flashlight in case the lights went out. I sat and played games with their son while our parents hung out in the living room. We counted down the ball drop and then went home. Story 39. I was at my cousin's birthday party. The power went out shortly after midnight. We freaked out a bit, then went to sleep. In the morning, we saw the notice on the fridge that the outage was scheduled. Story 40. At a guy's house with cool parents who let us drink underage, but we had to sleep over. I remember that terrible Will Smith Willennium song being prominent. Story 41. On a hill with my parents and sister, watching them genuinely panic about the year 2000 problem before they started loudly arguing about it. This was followed by the utterly disappointing firework display 10 kilometers away. I would have given anything to go hang out with the friends drinking further up the hill. I was 13. Story 42. My mom ran over my foot that night. I was leaning against the car getting ready to go spend the night with my best friend. Thanks for the funny memory, haha. Story 43. Montreal. I lived in the Northeast and was under 21 years old at the time. My friends and I used to go up there a couple of times per year because the drinking age was 18 and the United States currency exchange rate was a plus. Big Molson cans as soon as we crossed the border. Casinos and strip clubs for 75 cents on the dollar. Good times. Story 44. At first, I made an unsuccessful trip for food hoodies at Ginsberg's in Hudson, New York, then came home to watch the ball drop with our flashlights in hand and ready to turn on. Wall phones within reach. Luckily, none of these were needed and everything turned out okay. Story 45. Hoping all the store computers and cash registers in my district worked normally the next day because of the year 2000 problem. They were fine as my company planned ahead. Story 46. It's kind of weird that I remember this because I don't remember much of my early childhood, but I was sick with the flu or some nasty virus. A lovely neighbor we had came to our house dressed as Santa and brought me some sweets. He said that his reindeer told him I was sick and I couldn't stay awake for the new year, so he rushed to bring me gifts before all the other kids. It's possible I hallucinated all of that due to fever, but I like to believe it actually happened. Story 47. On a ship on a lake near my hometown, we were listening to the song The Final Countdown. This song fits the transition to 2025 quite well too. Good luck out there. Story 48. I went to the 16th Street Mall in downtown Denver. Most of the businesses put up boards to protect their windows, but it wasn't needed. There were more police in riot gear out than any revelers. A medium-sized crowd gathered at Writer Square, but with no one acting as a coordinator, it was just a lot of milling about and around 3 countdowns to midnight.